Previously, I mentioned that we were running away from DRC Congo. Before, we ran from Burundi, which is my native country, where I was born. I'm Burundian. So, we ran from our country to DRC Congo, and running from war. When we arrived in Congo, another war broke, which was, in my opinion, even worse than what we had seen before. Now, we had to run back to Burundi. And when we ran back to Burundi, we were welcomed by a small church. And at the border, so they helped us with transport and they took us to a refugee camp. And this refugee camp had amazing people. There was a church, a good community. There was a few missionaries there. And this refugee camp was built around the church where my parents used to go. So we had some relatives there. It was a good time to kind of reconnect with the family, extended family, which include my cousins. They were there, my aunties and uncles. So it's kind of nice to be able to be back together, even though it was in a refugee camp. So there was thousands of people living in there. A small congested area. So many people. There were, a lot of outbreak, different conditions, I guess, due to lack of, sanitary places and all those kind of things. So there were a lot of difficulties, in the refugee camp to live there together. But I think that I'm not gonna go into details a lot as yet, but it was a nice community, church. And so we lived in a small tent. So I'm talking about a tent. There's no bedroom, there's nothing. That was my parents, my dad and my mom, and 5 of us as kids. So we lived in that tent for quite some time, and we would depend on, various organizations who would bring food to us, which include the UNHCR. So these people that would come and would give us food. We didn't have clothes. You would have to depend to people who would bring clothes. All these organizations. There were a couple of missionaries who were there supporting us because they were part of the church as well, and they'd be getting help and from international partners who would come and assist and help the refugees in the camp. As we lived there, I started growing up as a little boy, now starting to be aware. Starting to have interest in things. I remember one day I just grew an interest in studying. I just wanted to go to school. I started going into what do you call them? The place where we threw there was a very big pit where we threw the garbage. If you call garbage or rubbish, depending on where you're from, if you're American or British. But so there was a place where we threw garbage or rubbish into the pit, and it was a very dangerous place. But that was our playground, and it was very deep, a very, very deep pit, very large. So we're going to throw things, whatever that you call, household waste, things like that. We go there, and I remember my mom used to tell us not to play around it, but boys, sometimes I try not to blame my boys too, because, boys, they're just boys. I would still go and play around that because we thought it was fun. And when there is too much of this rubbish or garbage into the pit, they will burn them. And when they're burning them, they will tell kids not to get close, because if you fall inside it, that's it. And I remember that when we were playing there, one of my friends fell inside. And we didn't survive. There's so much that happened in that camp. That was extreme poverty. In terms of sanitary, in terms of toilets, all these things were like really, really bad. So I started growing interest about school. And what did I do? I started going into those area where they threw garbage and rubbish, and I would look for pieces of paper with things written on them. And then I would take that piece of paper at home, and I will ask my dad, I borrow his pen, and I start going through them. So that was my preschool. So I would go through them and copy everything. I didn't know how to write, I didn't know how to read, but that was my first step. I would just go, I was just interested in what is this, that, the books, how do you put these things together? So I would go and collect all these pieces of paper with a few things written on them. I would try a few words written on them, and I would try to copy them. So eventually, in the refugee camp, they started a school, and the school was tent. So we actually had a school built with tents, and inside we had we would sit on stones, and eventually later on they built branches. They would bring branches of trees, put them together, and we sit on them like logs of trees, and we sit there and study. It wasn't an ordinary school, as you can hear. So that was the school that was they studied in the refugee camp, and those who were formerly teachers who ran to this refugee camp as teachers, they would put them together and just start teaching kids. But there was high demand. There were so many kids who could not go to school, who did not get a chance to go to school in the previous few years, who were older than me. And my sister, who is older than me, had not gone to school either. She's 2 years older than me. So what happened? They prioritized the older kids. But I said, I want to go to school. I really want to go to school. And they said, you need to wait for the next year. I remember I was so angry. I was crying and angry. And my mom said, you just have to wait. Your sister is the one who is priority now. They're prioritizing older kids. All right. So I was really sad, and I made a plan. I said, I'm not going to just give up. I'm not going to just sit and. So when my sister went to school, I would sneak behind. So we enter into this tent, and I would stay outside, and I would watch through a hole. So tents, they were not fully they were not the best tents. There were some holes. So I would just go and watch what they are doing, and I would bring a piece of paper with me. Oh man, yeah. When I remember, it's crazy. But I believe God was starting to build something in me. God was calling me. God was showing me His plan, for my life. So as a refugee boy inside that refugee camp, I started having these are actual visions, So I really wanted to know how to read and how to write and learn things. So I started to attend secretly, and I would watch what the teacher's teaching, and I thank God that I could retain information very easily. Let me just put it that way. So I would come home and I would start writing, A, B, C, D, or whatever these things, and the letters A, B, and it was strange. At this point, in my life, what I used to do was just playing football. I used to make toy cars out of wires, and I would sell them. So that was one of the things that I used to do as a little boy, because I didn't have any toys, so I would make them myself. Anyway, so we do this, but I felt like no, this is not what I don't want to just keep making toys and having fun with other kids. I want to go to school. So eventually the teacher noticed that I was coming actually regularly and hide and watch what she's teaching. So she talked to my mother and my father, because we lived in the same tent. We all knew each other. We lived in the same camp, so they were like neighbors. The teacher talked to my father and my mother. Said, this makes me a bit, emotional, just to see what God can do. So they told them. My teacher told them. I told my parents, we will let him come in. I don't think it's fair to let him just stay outside. Yeah. That was the beginning. So they let me in. I was hungry to study. I was hungry of learning. And so they welcomed me in. They welcomed me in the class. I was not on the list. I was just there as an observer. So they told me, the teacher told me, you can come in anytime. But I was so excited. I was like, it was like the best day of my life. I entered the school every single day. Whatever they teach, I go home and tell my parents, we learn this letter, this and this and this, and this is how it's written. This is how you write it. The tent, when it rained, the class stopped. There was mud on the floor, so obviously mud. So when it rains, the water, we run through the class. There was no door, obviously. So eventually they put like different branches of trees on different sides, and then they put tents together and a tent on top. But when it rained, there would be mud in the class. And we didn't have shoes, obviously. We didn't have shoes. We didn't have uniform. We didn't have anything. We just walk in, and we didn't have to have a shower to go to school. It was just that was the life. We just walk in. And I remember sometime when it rained, the teacher would be standing in front of the class, and there would be like a puddle of water, like a lot of water between the teacher and the student. And all of us just mad, and we still enjoy class. I remember those days. So I remember when they, in the class, on the class task, they would call names. They call names, whatever name. But they never called my name because I was not on the list of students. But for me, that didn't matter. I didn't care. So we stayed there, and I studied, and I loved it. Before the end of primary one, so that was primary one. In the second term, the teacher asked the headmaster to put me on the list. And she said, I think, David should be on the list. And officially, I became a student of that school in the refugee camp. And before it ended, before we finished the school year, something else happened. Something happened that again changed everything. An event that occurred that changed everything. Now, we'll talk about that in the next episode. But at this point, I was just enjoying my life as a student. We'll see in the next video where I'll be talking about this event that happened and that changed everything again. Previously, I talked about starting school. It wasn't easy. My transitioning from home to starting school, my first year of education ever, primary one, it was it was interesting. So now I'm getting towards the end of primary one, and we had to leave the refugee camp. At this point, there was not a lot of support. So we're starting to ask, people to get out of the refugee camp and try to get on with their lives. The area where my house was before the war started, it was like a jungle. In fact, no one was allowed to enter that area. It was still a red zone. Everything had been destroyed. Everything, trees had grown. It was just like a jungle. Monkeys and all kind of animals living in there. So this was a few years later. So when we returned, so now we lived in this refugee camp. I'm in a primary one. The war is still ongoing in the country, but there's not enough support for the refugees. So we need to get out. So my family and all of us, we moved to an area, the closest area that we could live in, so that I could continue going to school. Because so the school was in the refugee camp. Now we are getting out of the refugee camp. I could not go to any other school, so I had to find ways to continue going to school. Just, I wanted to mention that during my time as a child, there were so many children who were 15, 16, 17, 18 years old who didn't know how to read, how to write, who did not get a chance to go to school. Lots of them. So myself growing up, most of the time I would be the youngest of the class. So as a primary one child, even though I was the youngest, I didn't want to quit school. I wanted to continue. So we went and lived somewhere which was over an hour walk from the refugee camp. So we decided, so at this point they brought a rule that children should come to school with uniform. Those who were still in the camp, in the refugee camp, they were provided with uniforms, but we didn't get any. So I needed uniform to go to school, and my parents didn't have anything. So I will come on that later, just in a minute. So we lived in over an hour walk journey. So when we moved there, I continued going to school. As a primary one child, think about it. I would walk over an hour, between an hour and a half, 60 to 90 minutes of walk, going to school and coming back home. On my way, there was no houses. At one point, there was nothing on the road. It's just myself and my sister. We walk and walk and walk. Just think about the primary one child walking every single day for an hour and a half on the road. I don't know how. I just wanted to go to school. So I started walking. I remember every single day we arrived home when it was dark. And in the morning, we wake up and walk again back to school. It was kind of fun on the way. This is a time where you won't see any car on the road. You won't see anyone. Or you will see animals, usually monkeys and other things. And you would see a lot of fruits. There were a lot of trees around and fruits. So we just help ourselves on trees, mango, guava, different kind of fruits on the way to school. It was kind of fun, but it was a long, long way. Now about the uniform. I was there and I didn't have uniform, and guess where I found uniform? My first uniform was my uncle's uniform when he was in primary 6. So that's what I found. So my mother told me, I found you a new set of uniform that you can use to go to school. And I was so excited, I was so excited. And then I found that was like trousers. The primary 6 size on a primary 1 student. So my mom brought it. So my uncle brought it to my mom. My mom gave it to me. So the trousers, the shorts were like trousers, and the shirt, you can imagine. You can imagine. So it was so huge on me. But at the time, I didn't even notice that. I was just so excited. My mom did a pin, on the waist so that it can fit me properly. A pin on the waist of the shorts, or should I call them trousers? And because it was a long journey, so they got us some shoes, and we just walk every single day. Then we found out that there were 2 other children who lived in the same area with us, and there was a new teacher who was a teacher at our school, the refugee camp. So this teacher took the responsibility of taking her 2 children and myself and my sister together back to school and from school. So that was reassuring for my parents to know that there's an adult who actually walk with us to school. Yeah, so that was my life. That was a big change for me. I don't know how today, thinking about it, I cannot comprehend it. So we studied in that school until finish a year, primary 1, and then we found another school that was closer to where we lived. And my mother went there, and the teacher, who was the teacher towards our former school, so at the camp, at the refugee camp, the teacher who used to walk us to school and bring us back home, she played a huge role in securing a place for myself and my sister to be able to go to that other school that was closer. So now we would walk roughly about 45 minutes instead of walking about an hour and a half. So it was about 45 minutes, and that was good. So I went to that school, primary 2 now, primary 3, primary 4. Growing up during that time, war was normal. hearing gunshots was just like hearing someone talking to you. But there was one code that every child knew. When you hear gunshots, you run home. When you hear gunshots, you run home. And I'm not talking about walk home, run home. So wherever I am, if I hear some gunshots, I'll just run. Make sure that I'm with my parents. Because if you take too long, maybe when you arrive home, there won't be anybody. Everyone would be gone. So you need to be there on time, so that if you have to leave, so you will leave as a family. So I remember going to school in the morning, but just knowing that, if I hear anything, my mom would always say, if you hear anything, come back home. If you hear anything, run back home. And it was just a different lifestyle. Primary 2, primary 3, primary 4. It was very normal for us to hear someone who got shot dead on the road. Now that I'm talking about it, it sounds beyond understanding. But it was normal. You would go to school, on your way to school, they'd say, oh, there is a man on that road. There's a man that got shot dead. He's still there, like kids. And we just walk, it was crazy. And all these things were normal. Until primary 5 now. Primary 5, before I reached primary 5, there's so many things that happened among my friends. I thank God that He protected me. As I was becoming a teenager, so the age of 10, 11, most of my friends were taking the wrong direction. I'm talking a time when kids would join the rebellion movement. I'm sure you've heard of child soldiers. This was the time where even my friends, the boys that I knew, were joining this movement. God is so good. I don't know how He did it. Protecting me, securing me, keeping me safe. Yeah. In my next episode, I will talk about this exact topic. Now, I'm becoming a young man, 10, 11. At the time of the war, you would not be seen as a child. You're becoming a man, and now you need to take responsibility. As a boy, you fight for your people. I will talk about that and all the complication things that unfolded during that time. Yeah. Thank you for tuning in. I will end this episode here. Before we get into the next episode, let's focus on my time at school. Now I've studied in a new school, closer to home. I don't have to walk miles and miles or kilometers and kilometers away. In primary 2, primary 3, I got a new uniform that fit me. So things were getting better. Yeah, but as I grew up, things started changing. I wasn't seen anymore as a child. And then there are so many temptations around you. How do you navigate them to stay on course of what God has called you to do? To stay on the course of fulfilling the purpose of your existence. How do you do that? We'll talk about that in the next episode. Previously, we talked about a lot of challenges that I had growing up in a war zone, surviving wars in 3 different countries and living as a refugee in 3 different countries, including my own country, Burundi, and how I lived in different refugee camps. And previously, I talked about the refugee camp that we lived in when we returned back to Burundi during the Civil War. And after quite a while, when we were living in that refugee camp, at one point, they didn't have enough resources to be able to sustain the numbers of refugees. So we were one of the families that could not find a place to stay in the refugee camp. And we had to leave the refugee camp and go and live somewhere about 2 hours, a walk away from the refugee camp. But remember, I had already studied primary school in that same refugee camp, and there was any other school that I could go to continue my education. I was in primary 1. Yes. Yeah, I talked about all this in the last 2 episodes, and if you want to go back and check that out if you haven't, and if you have, let's just roll, Now, I want to focus on the part where we have been living in this new place, and I have been walking 2 hours every day, going to school and coming back as a primary 1, which was quite a challenge. Sometimes it rains and you wouldn't want to stop, because if you stop, then it's gonna get dark and then you're gonna get home very, very late, and it's dangerous, So I would just, if it's raining, if it's sunny, whatever, I'll just keep walking if I'm going to school or going home. It was quite a challenge, it was quite a challenge. But then I managed to find a place where I could study primary 2. which was about 45 minutes walk away from my house. And that's where I studied primary 2, and it was an amazing experience. So now, as growing up as a child, there's a boy in a war zone. I talked about how my country, Burundi, was torn apart by civil war for many years, for over a decade of active war in the country. I know that most people do not know about this information about what happened to Burundi, and that's why I'm very, very close to actually be able to share this with you as a personal experience. So now, growing up in this country that was torn apart by war, and as a teenager, you're starting to discover yourself, discover the world around you. You're starting to discover what is your place in the society. And as a little boy who was becoming a teenager now at age, 10, 11, 12, people started looking at you, because at that time, boys, as you grow up, they would tell that it's time for you to join, the army, or to join the rebellion movement to fight for the good cause. I'll give you a little bit of big background. Where I was born is in a place called Kamenge in Burundi, which is the place where the actual organization of the rebellion movement and the recruitment and everything was happening at the very beginning of civil war. So growing up in that environment with those kind of people, they would expect me to be able to contribute to the struggle, to fight against, for the struggle of my people. So at that time, there was a lot of division, and then for myself, people start looking at me and say, maybe one day you become a warrior, maybe one day you come and fight for your people. And so as a teenager, I remember being puzzled about what to do, started questioning about what life is about. I've seen a lot at this point. I've seen a lot of people, being killed in front of my eyes. I've seen people who have been dead for days left, to decompose in open air. I had seen a lot of things that were very, very bad. And now, as a teenager, I'm going to school, as I said previously, I would go walking to school. It was pretty normal to find a dead body on the road. And you just find a crowd of people looking, and they say, if you ask what's happening there, they will tell you, it's someone who was shot last night, blah, blah, blah. And you just go and look and say, oh, right, okay. And as a teenager, I didn't know the process of what happened after that, but, the adults would know what to do with the body. So this is the kind of environment that I was growing up in, which is very complicated. So now, as I'm starting to discover myself and finding my place in the world, in the community, in my society, somehow God protected me, because He used to take me with Him. And that, I believe, is one of the things that protected me. So when I'm not at school, I will be at church, I'll be playing with my friends, and my dad will invest time with me to take me either to church or to prayer meetings. I remember sometimes he would take me to prayer meetings where there is only adults and I'm the only kid with them. But this transformed me. This made me the person that I am today. So I believe that's one of the things that protected me from, getting involved with guns and active war. And I don't know if I would be here today. I'm not saying that, I'm not criticizing anything here, but I'm just saying that God favored me, He protected me, and I really thank Him for that. So now, as I entered primary 5, in the area where we lived, which was very far from where we used to live in the refugee camp, now this area was invaded by the armed groups who wanted to take over the whole area. So we had to run away from this area. We ran miles and miles, carrying luggages. And this was, I think, one of the last active wars that I was involved in, that I experienced. And there is something that happened during this war that I'm going to talk about in the end of this video, that really, to this day, it's something that affected me. Something that I wish it did not happen. Right, so I'll come back to that later in the video. Now, so this war started, the rebellion movement. We were just sleeping during the night, heard bombs and guns and shootings, and then we heard people running across the streets screaming. So my dad and my mom, they woke us up, and we put everything into the whatever that we could get our hands on, put them into luggages and started carrying them on the head, running. So we ran into the place where we used to live, as where the refugee camp was. So that's where we went back. We stayed there for quite some time. But now I was away from my school, and my school is one of the places that was bombed It was destroyed really bad. Luckily, there was no any children in the classrooms. So now I just started to think, I need to go to school. And I joined one of the refugee camp school that was started is actually continued. So I went back to that school, and there was a lot of teachers who remembered me, and they welcomed me. So I went there for a couple of months. But then after that, the situation got better at my school, my old school. So I went back there as a primary 5 student. But now we couldn't go to live in that area where the school was. So remember, we are moving back to where we used to live as the refugees. And now I have to attend a school that is where we had moved, which is about 2 hours walk away. So now I started the journey that I used to do when I was a primary 1 student. Now I'm in primary 5, so I had to do the same now, going in the opposite direction. So I went to this school. I loved it though. I loved my teachers. I had a really good experience there. I remember when we went there, everything was destroyed. The walls of the school was, there were lots of holes of bullets, and one part was bombed. So there was a part that was destroyed. But we just went in there and studied studying. And I remember at one point that the school received funds and they were able to reconstruct the school. So I remember walking there. So primary 5 and primary 6, I would walk there. I would carry my copybooks and my school material in a plastic bag, because usually used to rain. So when it rains, I'll know that my copybooks are protected, but I would just keep pointing on. I'll keep running. If I'm going to school, I'm coming back to school, and it's raining, because sometimes it takes a long time. When it rains, it rains for hours, and I would just protect my copybooks with the plastic bag. It was amazing. It was good. So now I mentioned about something that happened during that war that destroyed my school. During that time, the armed groups, they invaded, entered my house. So remember, during the night, we didn't manage to collect everything, and we forgot something that we had protected over a decade of war. Remember, we went to DRC, we went to Tanzania, we came back to Burundi, but we never lost this thing. It was very precious to us. And every time we ran away from the war, we always carried this with us. But this possession was destroyed towards the end of the Civil War. So when they entered my house, they destroyed everything that they could see. And they took these things. And by these things, what I mean, they were photographs. My mom and my dad kept our photos when we were young. My photos as a baby, my photo as a 4-year-old, like the life before the war. They kept all the photos together. But during that war, the guys who entered my house, they took a stone and went like that on every photo, on the cards, the photo card. They went like that, destroyed everything, took all the color. The first thing that we go for was the head. So all the photos, each and every photo that we had was destroyed during that time. So at this point, I don't have any photo that has been preserved for me as a baby, for me as a child, which is very unfortunate. It's very frustrating. And at the moment, it's not like now my children sometimes they ask me, can you show us the photo when you were a child? Can you show us the photo? I can't show them because of that night when all the photos were destroyed. So thank you for tuning in for today. That's part of what happened as I was becoming a teenager. In the next episode, I will expand a little bit more now, entering high school, my life there, and what happened. Thank you for tuning in today with Rick Clare and Dr. David. It's been a pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Bye. Hey, thank you so much for reaching to the end of this video. Once upon a time, there was a man who lived in a town where every single person wore shoes. And this man had only one pair of shoes. He didn't like them. He didn't like this pair, and he complained about it every single day. He kept mourning, complaining, I really can't stand my shoes. I want another pair of shoes. I don't like this type of shoes. And then as he did that, as a result, he started struggling to find anything in life that can be grateful about. So he was very angry, and he started walking down the street. As he walked down the street, he saw another man who did not have shoes. He was walking with bare feet. And I said, wait a minute, I've never seen a man walk without shoes on the street. He approached the guy and said, why do you walk on the street without shoes on? And the guy said, so he replied and said, I'm sorry, I can't afford any kind of pair of shoes. So I have to walk with bare feet. I said, oh, okay. Since that day, this man was grateful for his shoes. And as he became grateful about his shoes, he started seeing more and more things in his life that he could be grateful for. On the other hand, unfortunately, the man who taught him this story started mourning all of a sudden. He started complaining and he said, I can't believe that I'm the only person in this town who doesn't have shoes. He had just moved in this town and he could see that everyone wear shoes apart from him. And he started mourning about it, complaining about it. As they moaned and moaned and moaned, all of a sudden he couldn't see anything else in his life that he couldn't find anything that he could be grateful for in his life. He was very angry. He started walking down the street and then he found a man in a wheelchair just pushing himself in the wheelchair, smiley, content. And he looked at him and said, what? Wait a minute. You can't walk? He said, yeah, I can't walk. I've lost my leg. So the guy was an amputee. And then he said, okay, so you can't walk? Yeah, I can't walk, obviously. I don't have legs, I don't have feet. Since that day, the man who didn't have shoes was grateful that he had feet that would enable him to walk. Now back to my story. As growing up as a refugee boy, we struggled a lot. We depended on other people to eat, for clothing, for a place to sleep for a long time. My dad tried to find jobs everywhere. My mother the same, any kind of job. When we were in DRC Congo, when we were in Tanzania, and when we came back to Burundi because the war was still going on, they couldn't find something decent that would help them to provide for their family. At this point, we were 6 children. Now back in Burundi, we're living now, we had left the refugee camp, we're living in a small house that my parents were renting. It was a 1-bedroom house. 6 children, 1-bedroom house. The bedroom, so it was for my parents, and all the 6 children, we slept in the living room. When I talk about living room, I'm not talking about, it was a very small room. A very small room, maybe 2 to 3 meters on each side. A very small room. There we had everything, the household tools that you need for cooking, for everything, was in the same room with us. After that, we moved in another small house. Again, 1-bedroom house. This house, the floor was mud. There was no any concrete on the floor. And we slept on a mat that was made of grass. It wasn't plastic, it was made of grass. As you know, when the mud starts becoming more humid, the mud starts sticking on the floor, on the ground. But every morning we would have to roll the mat and put it in the corner and get ready for school. But as we did this, you will see the mat falling apart. And I remember one point we couldn't even afford a mat that we can sleep on as children. It was tough. So once it's starting to decompose and falling apart, it starts creating different kind of bugs. So all these bugs are like moist, they like, decomposing things. So as we sleep, we'll be bitten by all sorts of bugs. And you wake up in the morning covered with blood. I'm not gonna go through all the names of the bugs, but it was really bad. So you go to sleep, you are being bitten all night. In the morning, we try to sweep the room and try to make sure that everything is okay. And then a couple of days later, more bugs. I'm not talking about mosquitoes, other kind of bugs. Yeah, so it was very tough. Now we also would have a mosquito net to protect us from, there's a lot of malaria and things back in the country, in Burundi. So we would go to sleep, and sometimes one side of the mosquito net would come up and the mosquitoes would come in and they start singing, which can be very annoying. The mosquito will be singing and sucking all your blood and biting you and singing the whole night. In the morning, I'll get ready, go to school. Now, here is the reason why I talked about the story. When I studied high school, I went to study in a more affluent area. Because I had done well with my national tests that we do in my country when we finish, at the end of primary school, we do a national test. I done pretty well. I got a good score, so he gave me a place in one of the more affluent area. So when I went there, my mother prepared me. I remember she was saying, you need to know how to, to conduct yourself. These people are like this or like that. A lot of things. There were also division in my country. There was so much going on. And most of the kids that I was studying with, they were from rich families. And remember, I'm coming from a one-bedroom house. I'm sleeping on the floor. I'm being beaten by bugs in the morning. It's very difficult to get breakfast before you go to school. And I'm going to study with people who maybe are dropped off by car. It was a different area. I mean, my country was torn apart by the war, poverty, extreme poverty, but there were still, a high class, people who still had, means, So, and I was there. It was a bit difficult, but I tried to maintain myself, One thing that helped me was faith in God. When we believe in God, we know that we are not ordinary people. We are children of God. And despite of what could be happening around us, poverty, lack, these cannot change who we are. We are still children of God. And when we stick to that reality of identity, not possession, remember, what is important is not what you do or what you have, is who you are. That's where everything starts. If there is healing, if there is victory, it always starts not with what you have, or what you do. It always starts with who you are. So it's important. It was important for me to come back to the basics of who I am. And my parents reminded me of the promises of God. They always said, God will make things right at the right time. Remember, you are a child of God. So when I went there, despite that I was a bit, from a very, very poor family, I maintained myself. I remember I used to iron my uniform every single Saturday. I would wash them nicely, iron them. So when I go to school, I look like, a well-kept child, And I had only one pair of uniforms. So it was quite challenging. I remember then it started to worn out, holes at the bottom of my trousers. I was in high school, so I was wearing trousers at this point. And it was quite difficult. But even if there were holes, I would try and iron my clothes nicely. So when I walk at school, I would be seen as a child of God, So it is very important. So I know that one thing that helped me to go through it was the identity that I have in Christ, the identity that I have in God of who I am. Now I studied high school. It was quite good. I enjoyed my time there, but then I started being bullied because they knew where I was from. They knew that I was from, because now we had gone back to Kamenge, and Kamenge didn't have a good reputation, and it was known as poor area. And it was very difficult when they would bring these topics up and say that, even if you are Burundian, you are not really a Burundian, you are a low-class citizen, you are this, you are that, and that used to irritate me a lot. And I remember one day I was involved in a fight. I was one of the kind kids, that's not just my words, my friends, my teachers, they would testify on this. I was a really good kid. I loved music, I loved entertaining people, but also I was not a naughty child. But then one day, this boy kept going on and on and on and telling me that I'm nothing, that I'm, low-class citizen, insulting me in so many ways. So then it was the middle of the class, and I remember starting fighting with him, and things went really on the other direction. But in the end, everyone was speaking for me. They were saying, he's the one who has been, aggressive and he's been insulting him and provoking him. They said David has never been like this. We've never seen him involved in fights. But I fought with this guy, and then since then, I earned my respect. I'm not advocating for fighting, but I think at one point you have to stand up for yourself. You have to stand up for yourself. And that's what I did in high school. So I enjoyed my time in high school. It was wonderful. It was good. But coming back to poverty, I remember one point that we struggled with food. My parents worked really hard to provide for the family, but I really wanted some meat. I remember asking my mom, can we have meat? Can we have meat? My mom would keep saying, we will have some meat soon, next week. Well, and then at one point, I remember that she was quite she had had enough. So she had to think about something. And that's where I respect mothers. I respect mothers. My mom came up with an idea. She went and bought bones, guys, bones. And she cooked the bones, and she made a sauce out of the bones, made some ugali and some beans, some other vegetables. And she used the sauce of meat and bones inside it, and she brought it for us to eat. I have to say, it was one of my happy days. I mean, I didn't recognize this, but it's just that my mom wanted us to at least taste meat, because meat was very expensive. It's still expensive in my country, or maybe most places in the world. So I remember that, and my mom would make that sauce, and then we'd eat it. Yeah, so we lived. I remember going to school without eating. I remember studying a school year without anything, without enough material, and my parents would buy them gradually. So it was tough, but I learned to be grateful. I learned to be grateful for what I have, to know who I am in God, to know that at the right time God will make things right. So you might be struggling with poverty and lack. You are lacking something. I just want to encourage you. God has made things right for me. I've done the education. I finished I'm a medical doctor. That's one of the achievements that everyone told me that I could never achieve. I've got a good profession, good job, nice family. I've got a wonderful wife. I've got people around me who are so nice, and I've got a wonderful life. When I look back and look where I am today, there's a big contrast. So it is possible that no matter what you're living through today, that things for you can change. Thank you for tuning in today with Reclaiming Dr. David. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode, where I'll be talking about another part of my life as a teenager, now transitioning from being a teenager into preparing for university. God bless you. Hey, thank you so much for reaching to the end of this video. We really appreciate you. Hi, welcome back to Reclaim with Dr. David. How are you all doing? So good to be here, and I'm hoping that you have been enjoying the episodes that I've been releasing on my life story. Today, I just wanted to focus on kind of concluding the whole thing, and first to say that I'm not finishing. This is not the end of the series, but for now we will end to the episode number 10 that I'm recording right now, and then we will resume in the future. But in the meanwhile, I'd like to start talking about different topics instead of just talking about myself all the time. Right. So episode number 10. So basically, I would like just to focus on my teenage, what kind of teenager I was, what kind of lessons that I learned, and hopefully that all the teenagers out there are going to be encouraged and also hopefully learn from my life story. So as I said previously, I had a rough childhood, but also a wonderful childhood based on the faith and that I have in God and my spiritual life that kind overruled everything that was around me. As the Bible says that we are covered by God's grace, and that grace makes us triumph anything. So growing up, previously I talked about poverty and lack, but today I would just want to focus on discipline and the way of life that I believe young people should follow. But it's for you to make a decision whether you agree with me or not. If you don't agree with me, or if you do agree, just let me know in the comment below your thoughts. So as a teenager, I was a very disciplined teenager. I really was, I knew what I wanted, and I went after it. I set goals, I wrote down my goals, I prayed every week. On Friday I had a fast. I would pray and fast every Friday. I was part of a choir. I was the leader of a choir, and I was doing so much that was actually empowering me, allowing God to use me. I loved to pray, and I still love prayer. Prayer is a big part of my life. Maybe that's something that I'll talk about in the upcoming videos, but I believe that prayer is very, very important. So as a teenager, I loved to pray, and I prayed, I read the Bible, and as I did these things, they transformed me and matured me and brought clarity in my life to know what is worthy pursuing. And also that clarity helped me to be able to know what to focus on and things that I should not focus on. So, as a teenager, I wanted that studying was my priority. Because I knew if I wanted to change my life, I need to work on myself, better myself. So I worked really hard. I still enjoy learning, but I loved learning. So I read books, I studied a lot, but also I loved music, and I still do love music. So I listened a lot of music. As I said, I was part of a choir. I used to be part of a band. I loved playing music. It was just, was a wonderful teenager. But that's one side. The other side was the temptations, things that worked against me. So first, I decided that I would be independent financially. and at a very young age. So I started working. My job was to lay bricks. I would make bricks. As I said previously, I was born in a country that was torn apart by war. So as a teenager, there was a lot of jobs in construction, because people were coming back to their areas where they used to live and starting to build houses again. And so there's a lot of jobs, and I loved my job of making bricks. I used to wake up every morning at 3 a.m. And that is during the summer holidays. So I would wake up, and make bricks. And that was very, very important for me, because those 2 months of the summer holidays were the only time that I was allowed to work. So I would work and get enough clothes that I would need throughout the year, and things that I know I would need throughout the year. So myself and my partner that we used to work together, we worked on a very fast pace that people wanted to hire us, people wanted to give us jobs. So I get contracts from different people who wanted us to say, when you finish making bricks for this person, I want you to come and do mine as well. And within days, I remember there's a day that I laid 2,000 bricks, the small bricks, not big ones, the small bricks, but I laid out 2,000 bricks in one day. So I remember looking at that and say, wow, yeah. So as a teenager, I worked hard. I wanted to help my family. I saw that my parents were struggling, and I wanted to contribute to some, in some ways, but not depending on them. So I would encourage young people to not take things for granted. You might be probably were born in a family where you have everything, they give you everything, easily, But I think it's very important to not take those things for granted, and also to find ways to develop yourself so that you're not relying only on your parents, but to be able to contribute something back. It's an appreciation to your parents and to whoever that supports you. So that's one thing. Secondly, I was very focused in terms of relationships. I didn't want to start a relationship until when I finished high school. So as a teenager, you start wanting to have girlfriends, boyfriends, and there's peer pressure. But I questioned everything. Anything that I did, I needed to find reasons why. I would not just do something for the sake of doing it, but I would think twice. And when it comes to relationships, most teenagers want to have girlfriends. So I was seen as an odd one, because I would ask them, I just didn't want to have a relationship. And I said, I'm not going to have a relationship until I finish high school. And my friends would actually question me and say, why? That girl likes you, that girl likes you. And because I used to sing, on podium, and I used to, I still love rap music. So I used to do rap, hip hop songs and things like that. And as a high school kid, that makes you, a bit famous, and everyone will want to hang out with you. So that was a temptation. I remember some of my friends were like, no, you should get a girlfriend. All the girls are, I started, receiving letters, from girls and things like that. And I would there were so many temptations for me to sway away from my purpose or my goal or my decision. But I remember that by grace of God, I just stuck on what I said I would do. And people used to say, no, there must be something wrong with you. Why are you like this? Why are you like that? But I want to encourage teenagers, especially young people, before you do something, think it twice. Why are you doing it? Don't do things because other people are doing it. The truth is, at one point, you'll be away from these people. Yes, you're still together in high school as teenagers, but chances are slim that in the next 10, 20 years, you will still be together. Life will separate you naturally, and one day you found yourself doing things that someone else caused you to do, and that someone else is no longer there, and you are dealing with consequences. So I think it's very important that as a teenager, you make sure that any decision that you make, you have thought it through. And I also believe, as I said, by reading the Bible, by praying, by allowing the Spirit of God to guide me, I developed maturity and discernment that I would know this is the right thing, this is the wrong thing, and I would find courage to do it, regardless of whether if others are supporting me or not. So yeah, relationships. So I stayed firm until when I finished high school. So when I went into university, then I went into a relationship. But these are things that I'll discuss in the future. Let me go there. But you know what I mean. Make sure that you don't do things because they're pressurizing. Pressurizing you. One thing that I used to ask my friends is, if you want to go into a relationship, instead of asking me am I into a relationship, why don't you tell me why you are in a relationship? Because when I questioned them, they would struggle to give me tangible answers. Why are you in a relationship now? Because a relationship has a purpose. If you are in a relationship with someone, it shouldn't be just to, go around and do things. For me, every relationship has a purpose. I don't want to go into deeper, but let's leave that for the next video. But question everything. Make sure that you have enough tangible reasons that make that back your decision. So, the other thing that I saw as a teenager that was quite interesting is before I started working, I talked about poverty previously. My father, so I didn't have shoes. I talked about a story about the guy with shoes previously in the previous video, but so I didn't have shoes, and then my dad went and bought some shoes. By the way, quite interesting, an interesting pair of shoes. So my dad went and at the shop and looked at a pair of shoes, and they were trainers. And he looked at them. They were very, very cheap, but they were very strong shoes. And the front, they looked alike. But the back of the back of the foot, they were different. So if you don't look carefully, you think that they are a pair. But the truth was that they were taken from different pairs and put them together, the left foot and the right foot. So, but they were very, very cheap. So I remember my dad bought them for me, and he went and they transformed them a little bit, in the back to look a little bit similar. And I remember that I used to wear these shoes to go to high school, and at the start I didn't see that they were actually different, but it was a kind of a style for me. So I went and my friend used to look at me and like, those shoes don't look quite the same. And I'd be like, guys, just chill, And but at the one point I started pulling my trousers down to cover the top of the trainers, because that's what showed the difference. And I would just wear them to go to school. But I was grateful to have those shoes. But it's one of the things that happened when I was in high school that I think I should share. Also to encourage young people to be thankful for those small things. Don't take anything for granted. Now, as a teenager, I started to get interested in philosophy and questioning things about life, about truth, about what is right, what is wrong. And I remember by the end of high school, I spent a whole year researching. As a teenager, I was researching what the meaning of the truth. I was like, what is the truth? And I used to even question what teachers were teaching us. Like, what tells me that what the teacher's teaching me is the truth? We were learning about theorems, different theories, in physics and mathematics. And I was like, this came from someone. What if they were wrong? What if we are just learning things that are totally wrong? And I remember that time that I was a bit actually troubled by these questions. And towards the end of the year, I talked to my dad, I talked to my pastor, talked to another guy who was like my mentor. And I was like, I want you to tell me that they struggled actually to answer this question until one of them came up with an answer that helped me a lot. He read from the Gospel of John, and he said, Jesus, when he says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And he said, the truth is Jesus, and the truth is the Word of God. So anything that aligned with what God says, then it's true. Anything that is against or outside what God says, then it's wrong. That kind of helped me. What I'm trying to say here is, I want to encourage teenagers to think, to not just follow the crowd, to think things through. If you have questions, find the right people. Surround yourself with the right people, mentors. Read books that would help you to get answers, especially the Bible. Read the Bible every single day. It will transform you. I promise you, it will transform you. I was very fortunate to be around these people who were there to help me, to give me answers, also to guide me into what kind of books I should read and so on. So to finish this episode, I just want to kind of say that it is okay where you are. It is okay what you're going through doesn't determine who you are. What people say about you is just their opinion. It's not who you are. And that you should stick to seeking your own truth, seeking all the truth. And the truth is the word of God. Whatever God says you are, that is who you are. The circumstances around you could say otherwise. The people around you could say otherwise. Your friends, your family could say otherwise. But whatever God says you are, that is who you are. And He says that you are loved. He said that you are strong. He said that you are wonderfully made. He said that you have success built in you. You came here for a purpose. You are already a finished product. You are not here to please anyone. You are not here to fit in. You are here to stand out. Sometimes you may feel like you are not enough. Sometimes you may feel like you are lacking. But trust me, when God created you, He put everything in you. Your job is to get in you and get these things out. Nothing of your success is outside you. Nothing of your fulfillment is outside you. It's good to have possessions. It's good to have things around you, but nothing matters really. What matters is what is within you. And I want to encourage you to go and find that is within. And that is the only thing that can give you full fulfillment. And so when God created you, He created you with a purpose in you. And He gave you the Spirit of God to guide you and to give you strength when it's difficult, to give you strength when you're going through dark times. So embrace that. Follow your dreams. Follow your purpose. Try to find, if you don't know your purpose, try to find it. Pray, read the Bible, listen to the voice of God that is talking through you and into you. You will listen, you will hear. If you listen, you will hear it. Right? So this is the end of my program, my episode today, but I want to encourage you. And I hope that my story has encouraged you. And I just want to ask you, I want to urge you to take action. If there's anything that you feel like you want to change in your life, if there's anything that you want to improve in your life, if you are at the point that you are at the point of giving up, if you are at the point where you feel like you are the worst place, I just want you to ask you to reconsider whether maybe those were the worst place than you, but who are still pointing on, who are still carrying on. So don't give up. So that's it. And God bless you. And I hope to see you in the next video. Thank you so much for tuning in.